Daniel Brooks had been in countless boardrooms, sat at the head of glossy tables, and read stacks of polished reports about his company's community outreach. The numbers always looked good. The charts were always impressive. But something inside him had been nagging for months, a quiet, persistent voice telling him that real life didn't happen in reports. Real life happened in places no executive badge ever went. That's why, on a cold Tuesday evening, he found himself walking down the cracked pavement of a small neighborhood street, his tailored suit swapped for a thrift store jacket, his shoes scuffed on purpose, and a baseball cap pulled low enough to hide his face. The laundromat at the corner wasn't anything like the company's flagship locations. The sign outside flickered in tired bursts of light, and the glass door had a faint crack running across it. Inside, the air smelled faintly of detergent, but there was also the heavy scent of damp clothes that had been waiting too long to dry. A row of old washers hummed unevenly, and a couple of dryers clanged rhythmically as they tumbled. Daniel walked in, hands in his pockets, pretending to be just another customer. He scanned the room, looking for, well, he wasn't sure what. He only knew he wanted to see the truth his spreadsheets couldn't show him. That's when his eyes caught a small figure crouched near the far corner. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with her hair tied back in a loose bun, wisps falling around her face. Her sleeves were rolled high on her forearms, revealing skin that was raw and pink from the cold water she was working in. She wasn't using a machine. Instead, she knelt on the floor in front of a deep sink, scrubbing tiny shirts and socks by hand. Her movements were practiced but slow, like she'd done this countless times before. A little boy, no older than 5, sat cross-legged on the floor beside her. He clutched a small toy car that had lost one wheel, running it back and forth across the cracked tile. Every so often, he glanced at his mother, his dark eyes wide and searching. Daniel felt something in his chest tighten. He stepped closer, his voice low. "Machine's not working." The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes, warm brown, but tired in a way no young mothers should be, blinked at him for a second before she shook her head. "No, they work fine." She hesitated, then added quietly, I don't have enough for the dryers. "Washing's cheaper if you do it by hand." She forced a small smile, like she was trying to make the admission less awkward, less shameful. Daniel glanced at the machines. The dryers had bright yellow stickers with prices, $3 per load. He thought about how that was less than the coffee he had bought earlier without thinking twice. He looked back at her, at the way she pressed the fabric against the washboard surface, at the boy watching her like she was performing something magical when, in truth, it was exhausting work. "You've been here long?" Daniel asked, as casually as he could. "A while," she said. "I come at night, when it's quiet." She looked down at the clothes in her hands, rubbing a small white shirt between her palms. "Easier for my boy to rest while I work." The boy perked up at the sound of "boy," and smiled at Daniel, holding up his toy car like it was a prize. "Mama fixed this wheel once," he said proudly. Daniel crouched a little so he was eye level with the child. "That's so," he said with a smile. The mother's lips curved slightly at the corners, but her eyes dropped back to her task. Daniel noticed her hands, red, chapped, the knuckles slightly cracked. He also noticed the tiny stitches on the cuffs of the boy's shirt, sewn with mismatched thread, probably to make the shirt last another few months. In that moment, the hum of the machines around him seemed distant. All Daniel could hear was the soft sound of clothes being wrung out, the quiet clink of the toy car on the tile, and the unspoken truth between them: this wasn't about convenience. This was about survival. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt the weight of the decisions he made in his office, the pricing structures, the policies, the efficiency measures. They had faces now. One of them was a little boy with big brown eyes and a shirt that would be damp in the morning if it couldn't be dried tonight. He wanted to ask more, to understand everything about how she had come to be here, at this hour, in this way, but he also didn't want to intrude. Still, the question slipped out before he could stop it. "Does he have school tomorrow?" She paused, wringing the shirt harder than before. "Yes," she said softly. "He'll wear this one. It's his favorite." She held it up for a second, smiling faintly at her son. Then she dipped it back into the water, as if afraid the moment had gone on too long. Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. The boy yawned, curling up on a small blanket laid over the hard floor. His toy car rested beside him, and his eyes slowly closed. The woman kept scrubbing, her movements quieter now, like she didn't want to wake him. Daniel stood there for another minute, hands in his jacket pockets, feeling the sting of guilt and the slow burn of resolve, because he already knew this night was going to change something. Not just for her, but for him, too. Daniel leaned against one of the old dryers, watching her work. The laundromat was nearly empty now, just the faint hum of machines and the distant sound of traffic outside. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly, casting a pale glow over the tiled floor. He could see her shoulders moving in small, deliberate motions as she rinsed the last of the soap from the clothes, her hands red from the cold water. "What's your name?" he asked after a moment. She hesitated before answering, like she was deciding whether it was safe to tell him. "Maria," she said finally. "Maria," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. "I'm Daniel." She nodded politely, but her attention quickly returned to the damp little shirts in the sink. He noticed the way she carefully pressed each one between her palms before laying it over the side to drain. There was no wasted movement, but also no hurry, just a quiet efficiency born of doing the same thing many times before. "Do you live nearby?" Daniel asked. 3 blocks down. She kept her eyes on her work. "We used to have a washer in our building, but it broke a year ago. Landlord never replaced it. Why not use the machines here?" he asked gently, though he already suspected the answer. She gave a small, tight smile. "The washing is one thing. $2 I can manage. But the dryers," she shook her head. $3 is a lot when you have to choose between that and eggs for the week." Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, not anger, exactly, but a kind of worn-down acceptance. Like she had learned not to expect much, because expecting meant getting disappointed. Daniel didn't push, but she kept talking anyway, as if letting the words out might make them lighter. "I had a job in an office before my son was born," she said, glancing briefly at the boy curled up on the blanket. "After my husband left, I couldn't keep the hours. Had to take 2 part-time jobs instead, cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves in the morning." "That's a lot," Daniel said quietly. She gave a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. "It's enough to keep a roof over our heads. Not enough for extras." She gestured vaguely, at the dryers, then at the boy. "He doesn't know we can't afford things. I want him to think we're just making do in fun ways. Washing clothes in the sink like an adventure." "But," she stopped, her hands submerged in the water, her voice softening. "Some nights, it's hard to pretend." Daniel followed her gaze to her son. The boy had turned over in his sleep, one small hand resting on his toy car. His cheeks were flushed with warmth, his breathing slow and even. "How old is he?" Daniel asked. 5, she said. A smile tugged at her lips, softer now. "Starting kindergarten this year. He loves it, says he wants to be a bus driver so he can see the whole world." Daniel's chest tightened at the simplicity of it, the way children's dreams were big enough to fill the sky, even when their lives were squeezed into the narrowest of corners. The boy stirred slightly, his eyes opening just enough to find his mother. "Mama," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep, "is my shirt gonna be dry for school?" Maria's smile returned instantly, but Daniel saw the flicker in her eyes before she spoke. "Yes, baby, it will," she said softly. "Don't worry." She smoothed his hair until his eyelids fluttered shut again. Daniel looked away for a moment, pretending to study the washers. He knew that look, the one where you tell someone everything is fine, even when you know it isn't. It wasn't a lie born of selfishness. It was a lie born of love. When Maria turned back to her work, Daniel noticed her hands again, the skin cracked near the knuckles, the nails short and unpolished. He thought about the boardroom conversations where decisions were made about cost efficiencies and market rates, words that felt bloodless in the air but carried weight in the real world. Here, in this dimly lit laundromat, that weight was visible. It was in the wet shirt hanging over the sink's edge, in the coins she counted carefully before sliding them into the washer, in the way she avoided looking at the dryers like they were a luxury store window she couldn't step into. Daniel didn't say anything else for a while. He just stood there, letting the hum of the machines fill the silence, letting the image burn into his memory. Because deep down, he already knew this wasn't going to be one of those encounters you forget by morning. It was going to be the beginning of something. The next morning, Maria came back to the laundromat to find a brand new washer-dryer set installed for free. A note taped to the top read, "Greater than Maria, you'll never have to wash your son's clothes in a sink again. You are stronger than you know. Daniel Brooks, CEO. Daniel stood nearby, no disguise this time. When Maria realized it was him, she covered her mouth in shock. Tears rolled down her cheeks as her son ran up to Daniel and hugged him without hesitation. Maria whispered, "Why would you do this for us?" Daniel smiled gently, "Because no parent should have to choose between clean clothes and a meal. You reminded me why I started this company, to help families, not just make money." The laundromat was quiet, except for the sound of Maria crying into her son's hair, but this time, they were tears of relief. Maria stood frozen in the doorway of the laundromat the next morning, her hand gripping the strap of her worn canvas bag. The sink where she'd spent countless nights scrubbing clothes was gone. In its place stood a gleaming, brand new washer and dryer set, still wrapped in protective film. A small envelope was taped to the top. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. "Maria," the note read, "you'll never have to wash your son's clothes in a sink again. You are stronger than you know. Daniel Brooks, CEO." Her breath caught. She turned slowly, and there he was, the man from last night, but different. No cap, no worn jacket. A crisp shirt, a calm confidence, and a kind look in his eyes. "I wanted to tell you in person," Daniel said softly. "You reminded me why this company exists. It's not just about machines. It's about families like yours. You shouldn't have to choose between clean clothes and food." Maria's eyes blurred. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. Her son, clutching his toy car, walked up and wrapped his small arms around Daniel's leg. Daniel bent down and hugged him back without hesitation. The laundromat was silent except for the hum of the new machines coming to life for the first time. Maria held her boy close, pressing her cheek into his hair, tears falling freely, but for the first time in a long time, they were tears of relief. For Daniel, it was more than an act of kindness. It was a reminder that success wasn't measured in profit margins or shareholder applause. It was measured in moments like this, when someone's life was made just a little lighter, and hope found its way back into the room. And for Maria, it wasn't just a washer and dryer. It was dignity. It was time she could spend reading her son a bedtime story instead of wringing clothes over a cold sink. It was proof that even in the smallest corners of the city, kindness could still walk through the door. They said goodbye, but both knew they'd carry this moment with them, one as a promise to do more, and the other as a reminder that she wasn't as alone as she thought. Sometimes, Daniel realized as he stepped out into the crisp morning air, you don't just run a company. Sometimes, you run into a reason.